Testing the audio real fast. Sounds good. Hello. Welcome back. Oh, got some duplicates. Oh yeah. Fix that audio real fast. Alright, we shouldn't have me twice now. Welcome back to this week's dev stream. This week we are going to continue on the game that we started last week. I've polished it up a little bit off camera. I've added a bunch of 3D models. I've added music. It's still very much in demo state, so there's no animations. There's a bunch of features still missing. But what we were trying to do last week was just get the systems in place, the bones working, so everything is playable. And I spent some time off camera just making what we made look a little prettier. And this week I figure, since it's just a little small demo for fun, we can take a look at what all we've done. We can polish it up. I've got a couple ideas of a couple things we can add before releasing it on itch.io. And I will share a link as well, so anybody who wants to play can. And if you have any feedback, feel free to pass it in the stream. I'm also joining the voice channel on our Twitch, not our Twitch, our Discord server. So if you or anybody wants to pop in, feel free to pop in. Let me join that real fast. And yeah, you can talk about the game, ask questions, you know, whatever you want. So I will start the stream off with a short little 30-second video of where we left off last week. Let me switch to that. And this may look familiar if you were watching last week, but we built 2 bases that you can spawn units at, and basically you press enter, you type a message, whatever word you type, it goes and destroys all the units that have that word. So it's like a typing game where you can kind of spawn units to attack your opponent's base. They can spawn units to attack your base. You're both typing words to protect your base, get more resources to spawn more units back at their base, and so on. So this is just a quick little recap of where we ended off. Just very, very simple. It works. Units spawn, they run at the enemy base, and you can spawn your own. And everything has health. They attack each other, as you can see. They've got like aggro ranges, so units will run towards the nearest unit. And if they can't find units nearby, they run to the enemy base. And that's about it. Now I will close this and blow your mind with how pretty it looks now. That's not pretty. Don't worry about that. I'll just jump right in actually. So now we've got music first of all. Let me know if that audio is too loud in the game. I'm gonna also bump up our resolution since we are properly streaming and not building for itch. But we have a little tutorial here of how to spawn units, where your resources are, how you win. Basically you press 1, 2, and 3 or 4 to spawn the units. They cost this, and they'll just march to the enemy base and attack units on the way. We'll start off with a normal game, but I feel like that desktop audio is slightly loud. Let me adjust that. Alright, let's roll. So, units, as you can see, have a word over their name. They come march at you. If you type that word, they explode. The enemy base also has a word that you can do damage to it. If you press 1, 2, 3, 4, you get your own units spawning that run towards the enemy. There's no animations on the units yet. Holding off until we like finalize the models and stuff, just to make sure we're not wasting time on those. You can also see units are skinned red versus blue mostly. Wizard hats are a little bit off, but yeah, once the units break through, they'll start damaging your base. You get a little score, words per minute, accuracy, and so on, and you can play again. Very simple. When it doesn't break. So what we will do on stream is, first of all, I guess we'll fix this bug, which I'm assuming is what was preventing us from restarting the game. And we'll just kind of poke on through the whole code base, see what else needs done. One thing that I want to potentially add based on some early feedback I got is setting a like preferred unit to auto spawn instead of having to spam the key for it over and over again. So you can focus more on the actual typing, and instead of like taking time away from typing to hit 1111113 or something, you can just say like control 1 and they'll spawn as many stone guards as you have the resources for. Something like that, a little quality of life feature. But let's go ahead and jump right into the code already. Let's trace down where this bug's coming from. I am assuming it's from destroying that base and having scripts run on it. But while I am preparing to look at that, I will say, if you guys want to play this game, excuse me. Thought I had to sneeze. If you guys want to play this game, you can go to chromagolem.itch.io in your browser. It's just this top demo right here. You can play it in your browser. It's free. It's basically, I just uploaded it last night as it is, so we'll be working from here. And I'll push up a new version after the stream, but you can play yourself. So if you're watching and this sounds like a fun game, feel free to go check it out. Let me know what you think. Tell me what you would improve. Guess I will. Best way to share that is probably, let me just add this to the stream real fast. That's really large. That's too small. That'll work. So yeah, if you want to play yourself, just head on over to that link. It's called Word Wars, and you can play it. So let's go ahead and figure out where these 1,000 errors are coming from. And very simply, it is because the base gets destroyed when it runs out of health, and all of the units on the map are moving towards it. So there's a couple different ways we could solve this. I'm trying with this project to avoid having like a big game manager object. I'm trying to keep everything's logic in its own separate encapsulation, so unit controller doesn't depend on really anything. And likewise, like our building controllers don't depend on anything. We have a few things that link a couple pieces together, but they're very small and separate. We have our player controllers that almost depend on nothing. So just trying to keep everything very nice and separated in this project to see how that feels versus the last couple projects. We've been very heavily leaning on a really large game manager object. So obviously one approach to fixing this is to have that sort of game manager object with a flag for like, is the game over, has a base been destroyed, etc., and then have that either expose that flag to all the units to be able to check every update and say like, hey, is the game still running? If so, do all the logic. If not, despawn or stand still or dance or something. But I think in the interest of keeping things non-dependent on other libraries, the simplest and easiest fix here is probably just check to see if our target is null, has been destroyed. And if that's the case, then we can transition this unit's logic into despawning or like, I don't know, victory dance or something like that. So we will look into this update function. What we're doing is we're looking for all attackable entities, which can be buildings or units. And this is all just your typical aggro logic. We find any, then we attack it. But if we don't find any, which is going to be the case when the game is over, we're not going to find any units or buildings, which is why we're erroring when we hit this line here. We're basically saying, give me everything we can attack within our aggro range instead of our attack range. If there's anything there, we move towards it, which is fine because we know that something is there, obviously. But if the count is 0, we default to the enemy base. So now we just want to say if enemy base is equal to null, or not equal to null, then we move towards it, and otherwise maybe we just like explode this unit. So at the end of the game everything explodes or something. So let's do that just for funsies. I think we have in our entity controller we have an explode function. And what we're gonna do is let's give it a float for scale and we'll just have huge explosions at the end or something. So explosion scale. This guy, we can say explosion local. So we're just multiplying the scale of the object in all dimensions by this scalar explosion scale. So if you pass in nothing or 1, it's a normal explosion, but you can pass in 3 or something and it'll be twice as large, or 3 times as large. Alright, so in that case, we can now just jump over to this and say explode at 4 times scale. And that'll also, let me double check, that calls die, which destroys. We do want to make sure that we're not adjusting like score or resources at this point, because we don't want it to modify those values for the scoreboard. So maybe we just strip all that out and actually just do the explosion ourselves. We could also have like a flag for whether to also call die, but I feel like that complicates the code more than just branching out and doing it ourselves. So let's just do this instead. We say, what's our Oh, we want to put it in a loop because we have multiple explosions. We do like dust particles and explosions and stuff, so we can customize how each unit explodes a little bit more. So now at the end of the game, when the winner's units can't find an enemy base to run to, they're all gonna have huge explosions. And we will say destroy game object. And I guess we also want to destroy that explosion after a second, or whenever. Let's double check that that works. We'll jump into a hard game, and that's probably the fastest way to lose. We'll clear our console, and we're going to check to see, one, if we get errors after the game ends, and two, if all of these units explode beautifully. Go, 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 little guys. Alright, so because we set the time scale to 0 when the game ends, the explosion really just freezes at the first frame, which is probably fine. Realizing fixing that bug doesn't hook up play again, so we'll look at that next, but we don't get the errors anymore, which is good. And I do want to see that once more. Just going to type while we wait to lose. Alright, so you know, that's fine. Trying to think, it might be nice for like screenshots actually to show all the winners' units still on the battlefield, so they can like, I mean, in the case that this is a victory, you see your whole army and the enemy base exploding. So I think actually what we want to do after feeling this out is just not explode at all. We just don't do anything at all when there's no enemy base to move to. So let's see that once more. And let's just make sure that they all stand in place. Should be nice for a potential screenshot from their point of view saying, it was victory, I typed this many words per minute. This is my army in the background, basically. So it's a pretty impressive army, I'd say. And yeah, you can see all that. Maybe we can make it look a little nicer by disabling the words. But I think it's probably fine for now. I think maybe it's nice to be able to see the words. I don't know. You guys can let me know what you think. It's basically the words your opponent didn't type. But let's take a look at that play again button and see if we can figure out why that is not hooked up. So our end of game panel has a play again button. That runs client player controller.restart game. Which, if I remember right, works when we win, but doesn't seem to work when we lose. So let me take a look at that code being run. This is the script that we stick on the actual player controller of the local computer. So if we switch this over to multiplayer and you have 2 human players, you're going to be playing on different computers, but whichever player you are on your own computer gets this script, and that's what tracks your own words per minute, how many units you've spawned, how many enemy units you've destroyed, and so on. So this restart game shouldn't have anything really specific to who won or who lose. Let's go jump into an easy game and let's see if it works when we win. Because I feel like I remember that being the case, but it's a nice little bisection to figure out where the actual error is. Send a bunch of guys into. Okay, so when we win, as a side note, I feel like the words per minute is potentially off on a lot of these. It always seems very low, but we'll double check the math on that. If I click play again here, I am seeing now we're getting these errors again. Because there's no enemy controller. We'll look at that in a sec, but I want to click play again. So it does work when we win, which is weird. Object AI player controller has been destroyed, but you're still trying to access it, which is on the enemy base. So that should be us checking to see if there are attackable enemies nearby. Surely AI player controller doesn't inherit from entity. No, it's just a player controller. So, that is strange. Do we have any errors beforehand? Health bar has not been initialized. That's also strange. In that it was. We saw it go down, but... so... let's take a look at this. Attackable entities nearby. This is running from each unit's perspective. They are looking for things that are enemies within a overlap sphere. So it doesn't really matter which of these we're calling from, it's going to be the same logic, so we're probably getting errors on both. And the problem is that the enemy base is destroyed, yet somehow we have a reference to it somewhere. So are colliders sticking around when the enemy base is destroyed? Do we have our building controller, I think, inherits from entity controller, which is what handles explosions and removing. But I wonder if this... we're destroying this game object, but this game object does not have... oh, it does have the collider. Okay. The model doesn't have a collider. Okay, so we should be destroying both the object and its collider. So we shouldn't have the collider match here. It could be a case where we've got the collider and we are looping over the colliders, and during that loop it gets destroyed. But I feel like that's probably not the case if we keep getting more and more errors. So what I'm going to do here is say we would print out all the colliders, but that's going to include like allied units, so the number of colliders isn't really useful here. we do have this null check here, which I would expect to fix the issue, but I bet it's actually the collider's game object is null for some reason when we get it here. Take a look at that again. So it's line 71, the object of type AI player controller. Oh yes, this owner is an AI player controller. Okay. So this entity controller.owner is null. Entity controller is the actual unit, which obviously isn't null because it still exists, but its owner has been destroyed. So in that case, we fix this by making sure that it still has an owner. Right? So in this case, we are looking at all targets that can be attacked. If the target is not null, which it shouldn't be because it had a collider to even get here, and it still has a owner base, which is the crux of the problem here, where we are getting like enemy units or something that still exist and can be attacked, but their owner value, their player's base has been destroyed. In that case, we don't know who owns them, and it really breaks down. So because we know this is a 1v1, we can do this for now. The correct thing is probably in the building controller. When a building is destroyed, what we want to do is destroy all units owned by this building player. So that'll mean we would never get to a case where we have a potential unit that we can attack, but the owner is no longer in the game. All units in the game would have an owner. So that'll also be a safeguard, but we'll leave this in just in case there ever like a unit sneaks by, or like there's a delayed spawn or something where just happens to be added in later. So that should fix our error here. Let's go ahead and play through and win real fast. Just make sure we don't get any of those same errors, and then we'll go through and make sure the restart game works for the enemy. The opposite, like when we lose. Is that spelled right? Cataclysm? Probably. Novel Digukuri. Okay, so play again. But first, let's look at that console. So none of those errors. I think this is probably actually from our tutorial unit that we add in. We'll look at him in a second. But if we jump back to this game, play again should work. Cool. If we start a hard game and we lose, we want to double check that play again's still broken here. But you have this guy here that always exists at a slower pace and always says the word. I'm wondering if his health bar is not being instantiated because he's manually added in. We can add him in. Alright, play again. Does not work. Why? No errors. Let's look at the actual object. Probably want to put these guys in a container too, but that's fine for now. End of game panel, play again has missing object. Right, because the player building with the local client object is destroyed. So we probably want to move that play again logic somewhere else. Let's take a look at this. We've got client player controller here. And this logic obviously does not need to be in this class. But if you will excuse me just 1 second, I'm going to close the blinds so I stop being blinded. Give me just 1 second. Caught myself muted before talking for 20 minutes. That is much better. No more sun in my eyes. And as I was saying, this logic restart game is not relevant at all to the player, even like the client player controller. We can move it somewhere else, and we should move it somewhere else because this object gets destroyed when the player loses. So the question is, where is a better place for that when we're trying to not have a game manager? And I think the answer is in a game manager. I think this is a good example of kind of drilling into why we're trying to not have a game manager, and the answer was previously when we were trying to separate You Are Not Alice, our social engineering sandbox demo that we were working on with AI. We were trying to separate all that code out into different assemblies to make testing easier and make building faster and just kind of clean up the code a lot. And what we found was the giant game manager that interfaces with everything is just kind of impossible to tease out and decouple all that code. But this is a great example of something that would make sense in a game manager that also doesn't depend on literally anything else. So it doesn't have that problem. So it's probably like we're putting ourselves in a little challenge this demo of don't have a game manager at all, which is probably too far in the opposite direction. I think it probably makes sense to have a game manager that we can just use for things like this, like reloading the scene, and it doesn't have to have those problems. So it's nice to be able to separate that and figure out what is acceptable in one. So if we just take this guy, restart game, and put it here. Doesn't even need to be a singleton or anything. If we go back to this play again button, now we want to drag in our game manager and restart game. So now when either player wins and the other player is destroyed, we know that that restart game function on whatever script they are using will not be destroyed as well. Cool. So one other thing I noticed while we were fixing that is over here in this building controller, we do actually have some manual explosions going on, which is the same logic as what we wrote in this. And it had actually the same problem as why we didn't use it before, because this calls die, and we don't want this to. But it is the same logic exactly, actually. So I think what we want to do is maybe we call this guy explode and die. It gives us a nice little interface to do both. We have a die function specifically, and we also have a explode function specifically, which doesn't call die. So let's give this guy our scale as well. And so now this guy is the same, like functionally nothing has changed from we renamed our existing explode function to explode and die, which using the Visual Studio rename, so all the references to it should be renamed, so they'll all be pointing at this one instead of explode, even though it's the same name. But now we can go ahead and over here say explode at 3F for 3 times the explosion radius and take damage. Versus in a unit controller, you probably have explode and die somewhere, maybe? I guess that's up in the entity controller. So here, where's our take damage? Yeah, take damage, we explode and die when it's a building controller. And actually, since this is separated out, I feel like now with our unit controllers, we want them to explode and die as well. As a side note, we'll probably, there's a lot of like if this is this class versus if this is this class in our parent class, which is really big red flag to just move this logic into the child classes as like an abstract function or something. So we want to fix that health bar not instantiating that we keep seeing. We'll do probably that next, but then we'll come back and clean up this code too. But I am a little confused why our units are exploding if they are only labeled to die here. Let me go back in and make sure that's still the case. So if we jump in here, does this big boy explode? He does. Why though? He takes damage. He is a unit controller. We call die. It is a unit controller. We give the score. We destroy the object. Why does he explode? Is this not the path that we go through? Do we have anything separate on the unit controller? Attack enemy. Are we spawning the explosion manually in the human player controller? That seems likely. Oh, I see. They're not taking damage at all. They are dying due to combat here. And that explains why they're not exploding, because they're not supposed to explode if they just die to combat. Explosions from like the magic of the players killing them. So this is correct here. Cool. So in that case, everything looks good. We now have our explode function. We can choose whether a entity, either a unit or a building, will explode. For example, when we want to trigger explosions but just do damage, not actually kill it, we can also explode and die, or we can also just die if we want to kill the unit, like play a death animation without the explosion. Next up, let's take a look at our tutorial guy, who most certainly is not instantiating his own health bar. Or maybe he is. Is this reference set? It is. Okay. Do we still get the error if we remove him? Good thing to check. We do not. But if we turn him on, we also don't get the error. Okay, so we will fix that if we see it again. So let's see here. What have we done? We added a game manager which fixes the restart game button when you lose. We refactored explode to explode and die a little bit. We've used that. Haven't really done too much quite yet. We fixed another bug in units not being able to pathfind to the enemy base when the enemy base is dead. So let's just say fix some bugs on stream. Don't kill me for my commit messages. It's just me in this project right now, but I'm gonna bring Andrew in next week, so I'll bring him up to speed properly. Alright, let's look at that polymorphic red flag. We've got our entity controller, which has two child classes. It's got a unit controller and a building controller. We are branching pretty hard in a few places based on whether the function being called is on a building or a unit. So what we want to do is say public abstract void die. And we want to move these to the child classes. So for building controllers, let's take this. And let's give them a die function. Can I generate that function? What's the error here? Make class, right. We obviously don't want any entity controllers instantiated. This guy now says he wants to implement it, and we can throw that existing code in here. Cool. So now buildings have a die function. The explosion is independent whether it's a unit or a building, so it makes sense to keep it on the entity controller. And now for the unit controller, we also want to have a die function, which we will implement and grab our code. And lastly, we have this destruction of game object that we need to apply to both, because it was outside of the branching. Applies to both. So now when a building dies, it removes itself from that player's buildings array, which seems like it should throw a bug, given that's another script on the same object. And if the object itself is dead or gets destroyed, that other script obviously gets destroyed as well. I'm unsure why that doesn't throw an error. I feel like maybe we should comment that out and see if there are problems, but for now, maybe we'll leave it and come back to it. Not the biggest thing to, not the most exciting thing to hunt down on stream. Let's clean this up a little bit. We have our explode function, which we can reuse. Take damage, we probably want to do the exact same thing. We could keep take damage at this entity controller level and then have some sort of like trigger death function that's abstract for handling like how we want those units to die. I think the better thing is probably just to use die, and when a building dies, we also want to explode. So in that case, we can just die. Okay, so that removes all the like branching from this parent class, which also lets us implement it a little bit better if we create a third type of entity, like no, neutral units or airplanes or something, or attackable tornadoes, something like that, where they're going to have a take damage function because all entities have health. They'll have the helpers for like explode and die, and they'll have their own die function to like clean up their assets and references and stuff. So these look good. This guy is a little duplicated, but is clean logic. We've got set word. Let's do a quick little playthrough, just feel it out, make sure we see no bugs. It's fun, so why not? And then maybe we'll start on the auto spawning of whichever unit you decide, so you can focus on typing. Which also kind of helps with dealing with this emerging meta of killing a bunch of units first, so you have a whole bunch of units to spawn all at once. I think he's gonna get me. No. Alright, I see we have an error. Awesome, awesome. We apparently did not fix that. So in the unit controller, something is still human controller. This guy. Wait a second. We have entity controller.owner and we have. Oh, okay. The other object's owner is still potentially null. Alright, so I always hate these long null checks, but we also need to check to see if this current object's attacking owner. So what happened there was we have units on the field that we're still looking for targets to attack, even though our base just got destroyed. So although we were making sure that the units they were going to attack still had a owner building, we weren't making sure that our own units still had that owner. So when we compared to make sure the units are owned by different owners, that's where it blew up, is we didn't have our own owner anymore because we'd been plopped from the game. Okay, so that should fix that bug. That's a little bit harder to intentionally replicate just because you need to have units about to destroy your base and then spawn units that aren't immediately attacked instead of your base. So we'll fix that again if it becomes an issue. Let's look at what we've got next. I think maybe the thing to tackle next is could do a quick little container for all the spawned units. We could even use the player base as the parent for all those units, which would implicitly handle destroying all their units when the base gets destroyed. I don't know if that would be a good idea because it's a little harder to run like separate logic on the units when the base gets destroyed. If you wanted them to like all fall over and start bowing to the enemy base or something, it's a lot harder to separate them back out for post-game animations or something like that versus just destroying them. We'll leave them separate for now. I think the more fun thing to do is probably to get our auto spawning logic working. So let me say refactor entity branching for our units and buildings. And let's take a look at our canvas. We don't need this end of game panel until the end of the game, obviously. This how to play panel. I'll need to remember to turn it back on for the start of the game, but it's fine to turn off for now. Our spawnables is what we want to look at. So here, we have all of the units that can be spawned. Right now on our player, our human player object, human player controller, that's what holds the list of spawnable objects. These guys are static, just hard-coded in. They don't have to be, they probably shouldn't be eventually, but they are for the sake of getting the fast demo last week. So if we wanted to, we could add a script to the spawnables UI container or something that takes the local player, uses their spawnable units, and populates these UIs. We could do that. One thing that we should do is we want to probably have a script in the human player controller for which spawnable unit is set to auto spawn. I think it makes more sense in the human player controller script than to create like some sort of script living on this that has one of the 4 slots set to auto spawn. Just conceptually, it's a human player controller thing, and we'll just use a script on this for like we'll add a highlight highlight slot or something so we can mark one of these as yellow for whichever one's auto spawning, something like that. So let's take a look over at our human player controller script. Let's say right now the way we are spawning units is we toggle the input field on and off with just pressing the enter key. When it's open, we have the player type into it. It gets focused, and that's just for typing words to destroy enemy units. When it's not open, that's when we're listening for pressing 1, 2, 3, or 4. So the question from, I guess, more game design, like what do we want to do here is, do we want to do our current approach where if you want to spawn 10 stone guards, you press the number 1 10 times, and then if you want 2 golems, you press the number 4 2 times. That's what we currently have. The other side of the spectrum is you press 1 and it auto selects stone guard and it spawns as many stone guards as you can. And then once you get more resources, it just auto spawns more stone guards and so on. And then you can press 4 and it'll switch it over to auto spawning golems whenever you have those resources. That's what I'm leaning towards, so we can lean more into the like typing game versus channeling that StarCraft vibe as much. I feel like that's kind of a limitation of the StarCraft engine. Obviously that's why they did it, is because you can select your building and the hotkeys to spawn units is just how the game worked. There was no concept of like keep respawning a unit at this building. But we can build that in. The question is, do we want to support both? So do we want to have golems set to auto spawn and auto spawn whenever you get the resources, but also let the player press 1 or 2 or 3 to spawn those units if they have, they look like they all cost the same resources here, but let me load in the data. So if the player only has like 2 minerals instead of 5, if this is set to auto spawn, it's not going to spawn the golem, but the player could press 1 and spawn a stone guard. That's probably like better in terms of like skill cap, I guess. We don't really need a large skill ceiling in this game. It might add unnecessary complexity for no reason, because the interface to that, it would probably be something like you press 1, 2, 3, 4 to spawn the unit, you press control 1, 2, 3, 4 to toggle it like auto spawn or not. So I'm kind of leaning towards just doing auto spawning of units. So you press 1 and this guy is what auto spawns. You press 4, this guy is what auto spawns, and then you can just keep focus on typing the words. And if you want to just spawn a single unit of another one, all you do is you press 1 or 2 to switch over, spawn one of that unit, and then you press 4 to switch back. So maybe I think that's cleaner, like more intuitive, I'd say, because we can highlight which unit is actively spawning instead of requiring the player to just spam the same key over and over again and then kind of break out of that typing mindset of I'm typing words, but now I'm just hitting the number 4 over and over again. If we want it to feel more like a typing game than StarCraft, I'd say that's the direction we want to go, and I think that's the direction we want to go. So, what I will say is we have this system in place for intended spawn unit index already, which is just the unit that is attempting to spawn if we have enough resources. So what we will say is these inputs will spawn that unit. Well, they will set that index, and then rather than only spawning a unit each time this index is set, so we're resetting it to -1 on each update, we will take this out so it keeps its previous value, and then on update, just in general, regardless of whether the input box is open or not, we'll attempt to spawn that unit. So let's move this guy up and out. Let's put him there. Let's say, instead of intended, we'll say auto spawn. And we'll add a little extra logic here in a second for when one of these changes. We want to change the highlight in the UI, specifically when that change actually happens. We don't necessarily want to, every single update, highlight whatever the active auto spawn selection is, because we don't want to just be re-highlighting every frame. We can just do it once and it'll be done. But let's go ahead and let's take all of this logic, strip it out and say private void, well, bool, attempt to spawn unit with index. And we'll put that in there. Our index will be the auto spawn unit index. And we will return true if it spawned correctly or successfully. We will return false if it was unable to spawn, so we didn't have enough resources here. We've got our spawned unit, spawn position, rotation. We create it. We create the we just get some references. We spend the resources on it. We initialize the values of it and send it on its way to attack the enemy base. And I guess apply our texture to it. Just a bunch of stuff to like set it up, so it makes sense to put it all in a function of its own. So now what we can do is just say attempt to spawn unit with index there. So if this works, what we should be able to do is start playing, press 1, and it creates a ton of units. So you probably want to cool down on that, first of all. But also if we start destroying the enemy units to get more resources, which, oh, I see. We need to basically wait for our units to die to get food back. Or I guess we destroy the enemy units to get their food. So as soon as we have those resources again, we are spawning more. And already this feels way better, just in terms of like feels, because you can fully focus your attention on the words and the battlefield, rather than worrying about like how many units do I have, do I need to spawn more right now. If I switch over to Golem now, I just pressed 4, and if so now we're spawning golems. And of note here, we did have some units that were alive when our building died, which was the bug we fixed earlier. Let's double check. Well, we have different errors, but we don't have the error that we had earlier of enemy units trying to attack our units, but our units didn't have an owner set because the base was destroyed. So that bug, I'd say, is fixed. But let's find out what this is. Spawnable units index. Obviously this this is a bug because we default to -1. These probably all happened before I pressed 1 when we started the game. So let's just say if index is equal to -1, we return false. And I think that should fix that error. We'll double check in the next time we play, but yeah, that's kind of the default until 1 is set. But I think what we'll do is we'll have stone guards just as the default set. Let's go ahead and actually, we'll replay that with that fix real fast because I want to set the default. So we should have a bunch of errors. We don't. That's promising. Let's just play the game real fast the exact same way. I guess the exact same way would be me losing, so we'll let them get through. These are just editor errors, play mode layout and stuff, so I'm not too worried about those. But let's pause for a second. I guess we're auto-spawning golems. I pressed 4 apparently. So we're losing. Did we get any more errors? We did not. So things are looking good. Let's go ahead and auto spawn set to 1. Let's do -1 so we can do a, let's say, private void change auto spawn selection int new index. We will use this for each of these, and this will also handle highlighting the correct one in the UI. And then we'll call this inStart, which lets us default to 1 and also do the highlighting and all that without having to manually set that up in the editor. So we'll say auto spawn unit index is equal to our new index. To do range testing to make sure the index is valid. We don't need to do that right now. And then we also want to just highlight the selected unit in the UI. So let's change these real fast. And ideally here we'd have like a dictionary of key to unit, just for setup purposes. It's not super important for like gameplay. This was just a little easier to build last week and get it all set up and working. The main problem is you can't serialize dictionaries in Unity without some third-party stuff, so if you have a dictionary, you can't, for example, drag some prefabs in and say, like, I want the number 1 to spawn a stone guard. There's just no dictionary preview here, so dictionaries don't even show up in the editor. But using a list lets us kind of play around that a little bit. And so, for example, if we wanted to do this, the number 1 would spawn a golem. obviously the UI is a little hard-coded right now also, so we probably want to build that UI from our eventual dictionary when we've got that all set up, but for now it's a quick and dirty prototype, just showing off some stuff. Am I Polish? I missed your message earlier. I am not Polish. I am American. But are you Polish? What is kilometer? Kilometer is a distance measurement. I'm not exactly sure the conversion rate, but what do you mean? I think for highlighting, instead of creating a component on the actual list of units that can be spawned, we'll go ahead and reuse this unit preview UI controller script that we built, and we'll have a list of those and do the same sort of like parallel array thing that we're already doing with mapping these indexes to these indexes and so on, and these indexes. So our player will have a list of unit preview UI controllers. Let's do that, and we'll set that in the editor, but if we go and create a highlight function, and also a reset highlight function, we can then in our player controller loop over all of our UI preview controllers, and if the index matches, we highlight that one, otherwise we reset the highlight. We'll say if I is equal to new index, highlight, otherwise reset the highlight. So that should work. Let's go ahead and create our highlight functions, which we will do by maybe colorizing the background image to like there-ish. So in that script, we'll have a public color default color, public color highlight color. We'll set those in the editor in a second, but that can simply become, we get our image component and set the color on it. And resetting the highlight makes it go back to the default color, and highlighting it sets to the highlight color. Okay, so here, let's go ahead and this is a prefab. Let's apply this color to all, and then we want to match this color. So 0s to 160 is our default. And then let's get a nice like less pukey yellow. Or I guess we could do like a proper color. we don't really have like a color theme we're going with yet for styling. So maybe we'll do just yellow for now, and then like, doesn't need to be super bold. We'll grab this guy with 160 alpha as well. And so that should be the highlight color. Let's go ahead and in the start we will reset the highlight, which maybe we do even if there's no unit to display in it. We hide the tooltip and we set up the on-click listener. So this should all be good. They should all... Wondering if there's going to be like a race condition of this start function's reset highlight call sets it back to black, but we have the human player's start function which sets it to yellow. So this will work if we set it to black first and then yellow after. So maybe we just make sure they're all black to begin with, and we'll set them to yellow in the start. And I guess we have a nice little safety there of if there's any issues on the next frame, we are still looping through here and resetting the proper highlights. Actually, that's not on the next frame. It's the next time we change our selection. So we'll just double check and make sure it all works now. Let's reset this though. And let's go see if our auto spawn shows well in the UI. It defaults to the 1, which doesn't highlight this. I don't think we set up the reference. Player base, our preview controllers are these guys. We'll make sure they're in the same order. Stone Guard, Archmagus, Sharpshooter, Golem. Cool. So now we should default to Stone Guard. We should spawn them all. This guy should be yellow. He's not. But if we press 2, also not. Okay, so there's some weird stuff going on. I think what's happening is this did not apply to the prefab. And so these guys didn't get our changes. Unit image, info container. I think these should be fine. So now they actually get the changes. Let's go ahead and in this function, let's throw in some debug and say highlighting this UI, so it should show highlighting Stone Guard. It does not. So human player controller. Change auto. Oh, this does not. Well, it does. Right. It's because this is 0 indexed. These guys. Auto spawn selection to 1. This should be 0, I believe. But it doesn't explain why it's not highlighted. So 0 is our Stone Guard, as evidenced here. When we press 1, it becomes 0. Auto spawn. Oh, this isn't. We don't want to go up to the auto spawn index. We want to go up to the number of units, which is 4. Third time's the charm. Highlighted. Press 2. That's highlighted. Cool. So now, as our units are dying, we have all stone guards. If we have some guys die here, we'll get food back and we'll spawn sharpshooters. Now we get food back, we'll spawn wizards. Not getting any food back, gotta kill some of theirs. But we do have wizards. Alright, well that works. And no real errors. That was pretty easy. Let's say set up auto spawn system for units. And I think what we want to do, what feels a little weird coming from StarCraft, because we're handling it differently, is food. We are getting minerals, gas, and food as rewards when we kill enemy units. But I think what we should get instead is just minerals and gas, and food should be a limit on our own units, kind of like how StarCraft did it. You can have up to 50 units, so as you spawn units, you get closer to that limit. As your units die, you decrease how far you are to that limit, so you can then spawn more units. So let's take a quick example here. In this case, we're at the max of food, so this should probably say like 50 out of 50, like 50/50 or something, instead of just 0. It's like food remaining. And I think we will do that now. We still want to add in the spawn cooldown on units. You know, maybe it's worth doing that while we're still here, just logistically. Let's say public float auto spawn cooldown is like every 1 second, and we'll set a timer. We will say if the timer is greater than 0, we decrement it, otherwise it's less than 0 and we can attempt to spawn. And that should handle that, I believe. So first frame, we spawn our first unit because the timer is going to be 0. I think actually let's just do this and say a little cleaner, I think, when you don't have the 2 branches. So we always decrement the timer. If the timer is less than 0, we attempt to spawn, which is also nicer when this may not always actually spawn, because we might not always have the resources. So if we attempt to spawn, we can say bool successfully spawned. And then if we did successfully spawn, then we can reset the timer. If we didn't successfully spawn, it probably means we don't have enough resources to spawn it, so we want to spawn it as soon as we do have those resources. We'll ignore the timer until those resources are correct. So then we'll say auto spawn cooldown timer is equal to whatever our variable was, auto spawn cooldown. Okay, so let's just change. I think that looks a little nicer. Cool, so that should spawn 1 at a time. Let's double check that that now works. spawning 1 per second, cool. Switch it over to sharpshooter. It's got almost like a rhythm to it, so you can time it like this guy spawned, now I'm gonna switch, switch. That's kind of nice. Cool, so that looks good. Now let's go over and make those changes to how the food system works. So, let's say add cooldown timer to auto spawn system. Cool, so our resources are controlled from the local client player controller script, which basically says like this is the player on this machine, so the UI should reflect their resources. It's separate from the human player controller script because that can be multiple human players in the same game. It just handles their spawning. So in here, when we are drawing our food, we want to say, let's see, probably do like a public int max food is equal to 50, and then we'll say something like that. And our food is pulled from the player controller script. So maybe actually we put max food on that as well. We've got food here. Yeah, let's do that. Let's close all but this. Let's get our human player controller script. Normalize that. So all players have an amount of food, which we will call current food usage. And they now also have a public int max food usage. It's equal to 50. So that just caps like the number of units they can have at any one time. So here, we no longer need our max food. We've got our local player. So we can say local player dot max food usage. Max food usage. And we probably want both this guy and the other guy to start with current food of 0. Current food is 0, cool. Little confused why this guy, I feel like that should have not auto set to 0 unless it was already 0. But I guess we're not really paying attention to resources from the AI controller. We're just spawning units randomly for now. So here we should get now, this label will say 0 out of 50. And then when we spawn units in our human player controller, we want to change 2 places. One, we will increase the current food usage by the food cost. And 2, we want to make sure that we have room for the current food usage. Room to add that and not go over the max. So we'll say max food usage minus current food usage, so the number of food you have left to spend is greater than or equal to the food cost. So that should work. Let's play. What we'll see is food starts out at 0, goes up. And I think probably this is the easiest way to get to the max, is just spawn stone guards and then sharpshooters when we run out of minerals. I want to see if we can do that, just to test that limit on resources. So now we're out of minerals, we're going to start spawning these guys. Want to make sure we don't lose. We're going to lose. Alright, let's try again, and oh wait, we saw... Okay, so that doesn't work. Max food usage of 50 minus 61 would be like negative 11. It's greater than food cost, which is not true. So it shouldn't have spawned. Say. So this will just print out left-hand side, right-hand side of this equation. And we want to make sure that this is true. Let's play again. I'll play a little more to make sure we don't immediately lose. But I'll do the same strategy. Stone guards and sharpshooters. And we can see our food remaining is true. We want to see what happens when food remaining gets down to 0, why we keep spawning more. Okay, so -1 is greater than, that is not true. Why does this return true? Or maybe it returns false and we're just ignoring it. Attempt to spawn. If we have the resources, then spawn. But we don't have the resources. Okay. Unit gas is greater than gas cost. So what we should see now is that same sort of output where have resources is equal to true. Eventually it'll switch to false, hopefully. We're double checking that that is the case and it's not just us ignoring it. Okay, I don't want to overwhelm them too much. We have the resources true, false. Okay, so... Oh, but now we're not spawning more. Well, I don't believe that we fixed it. Oh, we're not spawning more, but we are adding food. You know what? One more place we need to fix. When a unit dies, and we are rewarding its resources back to the player, we're giving them food, which is not what we want to do here. So here, when a unit dies, we want to give them the minerals and gas, but we also want to reduce the current food use of our own player, which is just the owner. We say owner.current food usage is minus equals this.food cost, and since we moved all this down to the unit controller, we no longer have to cast all these, which is nice. We probably don't actually even need this. Alright, so now this should work, rather than refunding food to the enemy when you destroy a unit. You just refund them minerals and gas, and they get their food back when their own units die. So let's double check that. One more play. So I want to see one of my units die. This guy. We did go 13 to 12. Getting food back. Okay, cool. Start spawning some golems. Yeah, I really like this auto spawning system so much more. It's really nice to just focus on typing and like deciding which units to destroy. So we're out of gas, so we're gonna switch to sharpshooters, spawn those. We could add some like abilities like a boost for spawning faster for a short period of time, stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff we could add at this point, but we're trying to get a lot of the core systems in place, and then we'll improve upon gameplay later based on how things feel and what we want to change. But I would say one thing that would make a strategic difference here is if you find yourself in a case like that where you've been spawning somebody who you didn't have the resources for, and then you switch over, spawning one per second is pretty slow. It would probably be nice to have some sort of oh crap button and do like a burst of spawn a bunch of guys, whatever is selected. But that we could do now actually. We did just add in the last feature that I wanted to add in, and we still have at least like 20 minutes left on the stream. Let's go ahead and clean up those debug statements that I just added in. And the other one was here. We'll want to change the tutorial a little bit of like just explaining. You don't need to type 1, 2, 3, 4. You just have an auto select of which unit gets spawned. So let's go ahead and change that real fast. Let's see, what did it say before? Their costs are here. You can click the info button to see more detailed stats. I don't think we necessarily need all of the info that we have. It'd be nice to clean it up a little bit and just say the selected unit will auto spawn whenever you have the resources to spawn it. You can press 1, 2, 3, or 4 to change which unit is selected. Yeah, that's clunky and wordy, but it works. So obviously other things we can do at this point, add more units. You could add like more mechanics on the units, make them cast like StarCraft style spells when they're near other things. We could add races that you can choose from, so like this could be a human race that uses our current word lists, but if you have like a alien race, give it like a Latin word list or some foreign language that you're trying to learn more of. That might be fun. We could add a lot more polish to how things look. Obviously this is a pretty bland world, we could add like lanes the units spawn in, multiple lanes even if you want to get crazy. Add more buildings. The building controllers are set up right now to be pretty extendable to build like, StarCraft style supply depots or something like that if you want to raise your food count or be able to build farms that can give you more. Farms is a bad example. Build like a mine that can give you more minerals over time that the enemy units could destroy. Some of that's more like leaning back into that StarCraft vibe versus a typing game, so it's going to be more like mouse controlled, which maybe we don't want to do. Maybe we could figure out a way to, like, kind of the same way we have an auto spawner system, we could have priorities of, like, set a priority for getting more minerals, set a priority for getting more gas, and then it'll auto build buildings for whatever you need more of, or something like that. Obviously, there's a lot of like post-processing that we can do. We've got dynamic lighting in place, so if we built out like some light sources, maybe some fog, better skybox, things would look a lot better really fast. There's really any direction we wanted to take things, we could. Let's go ahead and re-enable our how to play panel, which we've done. So now when we play, it should ask us for difficulty again. Let's play one and see if anything just jumps out, see how things feel with this new auto spawn system on, say, like hard. And I will focus so I can ideally win. But my old strategy of killing a bunch of enemy units, getting a bunch of resources to spawn a whole bunch at once and overwhelm them may not necessarily work, so gotta actually rely on typing well. We'll see how it goes. So we lost. But one thing I think is probably a good idea to do is have some sort of feedback on when you don't have enough resources to spawn something. For example, if you have stone guards set to auto spawn, but you don't have any minerals left, or you don't have food or something, you probably want to highlight that red. Just to get it in your peripheral vision of like, hey, I need to change my unit. Look at your resources, figure out what new. So let's do that real fast. In our unit preview UI controller, we can also have a alert color. And for that guy, we'll just give him a nice like red 160. We'll apply that to all of them, which I guess does automatically because it's a new, well, maybe not. Alert color. What happens if I apply here? They should all be the same. Nothing? Why is this? Why do these guys? Oh, okay, now we did apply. Cool. So now in our human player controller, if we don't have enough resources, let's say unit preview controllers at that index can alert. Let's say public void show alert highlight. We will do the exact same thing. So here, this is the index dot show alert highlight, and we can obviously do some checking to make sure that that index is in range, but all this like more safety stuff I'll do off camera just to keep moving a little faster. But this, whenever we don't have enough resources for that unit, it should now highlight that selection red so you can kind of see it in your peripheral of this guy was highlighted to auto spawn. Now I see something is wrong, so I want to check my resources and see who to spawn next. So let's try that out real fast with golems, which should deplete our resources pretty fast. Should go red in a second. Cool. So if I switch to Stone Guard, he's also red because we have no money. But if I get some money, I mean, he's still red because we're not, we are out of resources again, but we probably want to at least turn it back to yellow when we've spawned one successfully for a second. So in our human player controller, all we will do is, we know that they are currently selected because that's the unit we're going to spawn. We'll just revert that color back to a highlight on any successful spawn. So what'll happen is if it's red and we kill a unit so it can spawn, it'll turn back to yellow when we have those resources. And then once it's out of resources again, it'll turn back to red. So let's double check that that works. So he's red. Let's do Stone Guards. We spawned one and then it's red. If I get some money from this guy, yellow, 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 red. Okay, so that looks good. Now we can switch over to this guy because we have gas. Cool. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Let's say we changed our food system and got alert highlighting. So let's take this guy out and say change food system to better mimic StarCraft's. And then we will also say show alert colors in the UI when we can't spawn a unit. Cool, cool. Alright, so maybe we can do a little bit of post-processing if I can remember where all that setting is and just make things look a little nicer. We can also add a few other units, but I think this is a good like rock, paper, scissors, and then big boy type thing. We probably want to balance these guys a little bit. It's kind of hard with our current AI enemy to determine which unit is the best because it creates different units every time, but we could let's go ahead and say enemies only going to spawn these guys, which should be weak to the sharpshooters. So we're going to go in and only spawn sharpshooters. And there's still a little bit of hand waviness because we have different spawn rates, and also different rates to which the player destroys the enemy units because we're not typing at all. But if we watch these guys fight, we should at least see like these guys have longer range. They're kind of taking these guys down a lot faster than we're being taken down, even with the enemy typing. So this looks about what we would expect. We'll do another game where we only spawn stone guards, which should be weak to the wizards. 'Cause we're kind of taking the old RuneScape approach of the combat triangle for a rock, paper, scissors approach. So with the enemy spawning wizards, we won with the sharpshooters. If we only spawn stone guards, I would hope that we will lose here. And they have one default guy, so I'll clear him out. So they should start attacking before we even get to them, which is why they're able to take us out. Yeah, not even getting close enough to deal damage, so that is what I hoped to see. So I would say this guy, the wizard, is balanced within the context of the other units. He's actually very, very strong to the stone guard, so he could probably even have like damage reduced a little bit, or stone guard could be a little more tanky. But let's go ahead and have the enemy only spawn stone guards, and let's see how they fare. If they lose also to like sharpshooters, which they should be strong against, we will go ahead and make them more tanky. Because then, I mean, we're closing the gap to the wizards, but we want them to be able to beat these guys, but not these guys. So we'll have the enemy spawn stone guards. We're going to spawn the... Well, we know this matchup, the wizards win. We will spawn sharpshooters, which should beat, or should lose to the enemy stone guards. So we got some archers coming in hot. They are probably going to win, I'm thinking, because they're extremely strong. But we'll see. I think we want stone guards to be tankier. Yeah. So, if we take these guys and give them maybe more health, just double their health from now, which I think is what golems have. So we'll adjust the golem after everything else. But now we are going to spawn sharpshooters. Accidentally spawned one guy, but luckily they cleared him out. So hopefully the stone guards win here. And it's looking like they're closing the gap a lot better now. But they might still Yeah, maybe we reduce the sharpshooter damage a little bit. Or attack speed even. That's a pretty hefty reduction in damage, but let's see how that fares. Normal sharpshooter. Sharpshooters are stone guards. We want these guys to win to get our combat triangle working correctly. Alright, they're getting closer. I think we want to maybe... We could increase their move speed, but I think we want to just keep increasing their health. Make them, like, embodied tankiness. Thought I had to sneeze again, wow. But they did win, which is surprising. So let's go ahead and do another game where we spawn wizards, which should still beat them. Hopefully. Alright, so I think we want to increase the wizard damage by a lot. I know the better approach here is to just do the math. But it's kind of fun doing it a little piecemeal like this. Let's throw in some wizards. Let's see if we crush them now. So I do think we should probably increase their attack range. Probably both them and the sharpshooters, just because I'm picturing when we add the animations, it's probably going to look a lot cooler if we see them like throwing a fireball really long distance, because they're going to be, their whole vibe is high damage, low attack speed, versus sharpshooters, which are low damage, high attack speed, but also at a longer range. So let's go ahead and this guy, let's just play with some values until they feel good, and we'll do the math to balance them later. Let's just double their attack range. Let's see how that looks. So aggro range of like 30. The red is where he'll fling fireballs to. Seems still kind of low, but maybe not at the scale. And then sharpshooter, have an attack range of maybe 30. And we'll do an aggro range of like 40. So they really just hunt down anything, really. On their attack cooldown, it's 1 on them. It's 2 on this guy. Stone guard is probably, we want like 0.5 or like 0.6 or something. But enemy is spawning stone guards, I think it was. So let's do our wizards. Let's get them in, have them hurling fireballs, which will also look really cool with the increased range, I think. So it's a little odd they're standing still. I guess that's their like attack animation timing. But now they are looking a lot better. It's looking like they do indeed counter stone guards. And obviously we ran out of resources because stone guards don't give any gas back when you destroy them, but mages need gas to spawn. So I would say though, wizards do counter the archmages. Let's try sharpshooters against them, which shouldn't win. But let's just kind of see how things feel. So they're really long range, but very low damage. Lots of arrows flying through is kind of the vibe we're going for. But these guys are really closing in. I think maybe we increase the attack speed of these guys so they don't attack quite as fast. Or maybe reduce their damage again. I think it would be cooler if they do attack very fast and they just do less damage. So let's see how this feels. Because, I mean, it's obviously way cooler if there's tons of arrows flying over instead of fewer arrows that just do more damage, I think. But in terms of, like, if we did add more units later, a sharpshooter, I think would be more, like, really long range, high damage, and really slow to attack. But that's kind of the role our wizards are in. So they're still pretty... Like, we lost because we ran out of resources, basically. But I would say that's what we wanted to see, is these guys beat the sharpshooters, but they lose to the archmages. Okay, and let's just double check that they do lose to the archmages again. I could speed up the time a little bit if I added some code to adjust the time scale, but it's kind of fun watching them. So hopefully our wizards will come out on top here. We just ran out of resources, but really, like, we don't have a lot of wizards because they're clearing them out, but we are indeed completely obliterating the stone guards, so from a unit style, that seems good. One thing we should probably do, let's just go ahead and say, we can increase the destroy interval, but we need to do that from the script that starts the game, which is tutorial controller. So we're doing medium, let's just say destroy cooldown of 50 seconds, so it shouldn't destroy anything. I want to make sure that we're not overriding that in the start function, so we'll say building controller start. Okay, so we are getting AI player controller start. Destroy cooldown. Okay, so it shouldn't destroy anything for the first like 50 seconds. So in that case, the enemies spawning stone guards, I think that looks good. Let's have them spawn wizards again, and we will double check the wizard versus range matchup, because rangers should win out here. I think they will because wizards are very expensive. You get very few of them, and it takes a long time for them to get into range, even though they do a lot of damage. It's just, with the stone guards, it's easier for them to get into range. Yeah, so these are looking real good. Sharpshooters absolutely destroy the wizards. And let's double check that the wizards destroy stone guards. This music's kind of a bop. I thought it would get pretty old by now, but it's pretty good. Okay, wizards are indeed absolutely destroying stone guards. So we know that most of the combat triangle is in place. We now just want to double check that stone guards destroy sharpshooters, which we will see, but that's the last piece of the puzzle. So if this guy makes sharpshooters, and we make stone guards, hopefully we win if everything looks good. So they're going to start attacking from really far away, but we have a lot of health. So hopefully we should be able to close the gap. It's looking like it. Awesome. So if I were playing the real game, now I see, oh, I don't have the resources for stone guards because I'm out of gas. That's when I want to switch over to sharpshooter. And that's when they probably like, oh, he's spawning sharpshooters, I'm going to switch to stone guards, and so on. So it's kind of a rock, paper, scissors typing game, weird thing. We got absolutely destroyed by the sharpshooters. I feel like maybe we want to make the stone guard even tankier. And if that is too much, we can increase the wizard damage, but our health is 20. Let's go with like 30. See how that feels. So they're going to spawn sharpshooters, we're going to spawn stone guards. So they definitely close the gap a lot better. We are now out of unit resources, so we're going to start losing more. But we are rolling through a lot faster. And once this is all balanced, we're going to take the Mario approach of just multiplying all the numbers by 10. Just for bigger numbers that feel better. That is a pretty long range. I think what we want to do is just decrease that a little bit. So sharpshooters attack range is like 25. And maybe we also decrease their health a little bit. What's the magic damage at? So 10. They're gonna kill the sharpshooters in one hit anyway. But stone guards deal 1 damage. So if we decrease this to like 4, then it'll take 4 hits from a stone guard. Still 1 hit from a wizard. I'm getting this mixed up. We want stone guards to be able to kill the sharpshooters. So yeah, we want sharpshooters to have less health. Let's try this again. See how this feels. Stone guards versus sharpshooters. Here we go. I think we're going to absolutely stomp them now because they attack from less distance and it's fewer hits to kill them now. I think they could even be weaker, actually. Because one thing we want to keep in mind is it's nicer when units die faster if you are typing the words. Because what we want to avoid is, like, if this guy, I start typing, but then my units kill him and I press enter, it counts as a miss because there's no unit. So I think what we're going to do is let's decrease that health even more. Let's bring him down to, like, I don't know, even 2 might be too low, but we'll feel it out. Let's just let them go. But I think when we switch to projectile combat, this is going to look a lot nicer, and it's going to feel a lot smoother. They've all got the placeholder animations here right now. Clear out that one tutorial guy, but now our melee guy comes through and stomps our ranged guy pretty hard, which is exactly what we wanted. We'll play once more and just double check that the range guy still beats the melee, or the magic guy, just to make sure that combat triangles working properly. Obviously we're losing here because we ran out of resources, and the AI player never runs out of resources, so they've just stacked a bunch of archers. But let's go through, let's spawn wizards now. Let's make sure that wizards lose to sharpshooters, right? They're strong against these guys, but they're weak against these guys. So these guys attack from a further distance, but they do less damage, and they attack faster. These guys have a shorter distance to attack. They're going to be hurling these fireballs, very nice and pretty, but they are winning. So what probably happened, we reduced this guy's health by a lot, and these guys are now probably the tankiest guys in the game, besides the stone guards, so let's make them the true glass cannons that they have always meant to be. They have 20 health. That's not right at all. Our other guys have 2, stone guard has 20. This guy probably needs like 1 health, to be honest. Because with the stone guards rolling in, they're going to be able to kill the stone guards before they get to them, but the sharpshooters should come through and kill them. Maybe even like 2 health. Let's see if 2 health is too high first. Because it would be nice to have 2 hits just visually. If an arrow comes through, I spawned a bunch of stone guards. Let's reset that real fast. If an arrow comes in, it's kind of more visually nice if you see that health bar come down to half instead of instantly killing the unit. But let's see if 2 is too low. You know, we could probably actually bring it up a little bit, since they're not even getting any hits in. So we dropped him from 20 to 2. Let's put him at 5. And if you just started watching, this is a typing game. I'm not doing a lot of typing now because I'm just kind of balancing the actual unit values right now. And I'm not doing pretty hard math balancing. I'm kind of just seeing what feels good right now so we can get the attack ranges and stuff correctly. This is feeling a lot better. The rangers are coming through. You see the health come down. But I'll show the actual game. Basically, the units that you can spawn you set up for auto spawn by selecting them, and you can also type the word on an enemy unit to destroy them, and you get the resources that were spent on them. So in a multiplayer situation, there's some rock, paper, scissors going on that you can kind of set up and forget about by choosing what unit to spawn. But for the most part, if you're trying to win, most of your time is going to be spent typing, and typing as fast as you can, typing as many words as you can. We have a very basic AI set up to just spawn random units right now for testing against, but next week I'll work more on getting this set up for multiplayer so you can challenge your friends and see if you can destroy them while typing. So I thought we had won, so I was not paying attention, but now I see we kind of need to come back. So they got us, yeah. One thing I will say about that is we have a food cap for capping the number of units on the screen, but the AI does not. They do not. They don't care about resources, so they got a few too many units and overwhelmed us. That's alright. But things are looking good. The stats on our 3 rock, paper, scissors guys feels pretty good. There's a lot of variance. We will still bump all these numbers up, probably in order of magnitude. So instead of 30 health, you got 300 health. Instead of 5, you've got 50. So it'll feel a lot more bigger scale and give us a lot more fine-tuning ability. So instead of decreasing damage from 2 to 1, which is a 50% decrease, we can do 20 to 15 and get nicer numbers that way. But I want to look at these numbers and just ballpark where we want our golem to be, because he should be most expensive by far. He's also the slowest attacking, most damage. He should at least be able to one-shot everything, I think. But he's very easily overwhelmed. So our most health that we have is on the Stone Guard, which is 30. So let's go ahead and make sure our golem has at least 30 damage. He attacks every 3 seconds. He's got an attack range of 4, which seems a little high. Let's see how that looks, because he's a bigger model. I think that's fine. When we animate him, his arms will come out about there. Move speed is 1, which is on par with, well, it's half of the move speed of Stone Guard and Archmagus, so I think that's fine. And he should be a cool guy. Let's just see how he fares against, I mean, he's gonna lose to most things. Let's bump his health. So he's got 20 health. And our Stone Guard, our next tankiest guy, has 30 and deals 1 damage. This guy has 1 damage as well. This guy has 10 damage. So to deal with golems, you probably want wizards, or a lot of sharpshooters or Stone Guards. So maybe 50 health is... That might be too low because it's so slow to spawn them. But let's spawn golems against the enemy sharpshooters, which have really long range but only deal 1 damage at a time. And it's really hard to see the golems with the text, but So we got one down. Just a lot of ranged units. Deals with them pretty well. We'll see this guy kind of, well, it'll explode when we can't see him anymore. And in a game you'll be obviously typing, and if one unit ends up being a bigger counter to them, that's fine because you have the player choice to be able to focus those specific units when you're destroying them. But I'd say those golems seemed very weak. They were against a lot of units, so like they were kind of outmatched there, but if we bump this up to like 75 health, which feels huge compared to 30 on the biggest unit, let's see how they roll in this situation again. Ideally, they would last a lot longer, I think. If you're going to spend over twice as many of all resources to make a single unit that your opponent can type to destroy, feels like they should be a lot stronger if they're taking up all those resources. So, health bar is looking a little bit nicer. I think we can even probably bump him up to 100 and get kind of that like if you're a player trying to decide what words to type, you obviously don't want to be typing units that are going to be destroyed before you finish typing the word. So having a little bit more time in the bigger boy that you're probably going to prioritize, you can kind of decide, hey, do I want to just destroy this guy or do I want to let my units deal with him? Let's see how 100 health feels. And if you think about the game from like the Spike, Johnny, Timmy perspective in Magic, golems are, I mean, they're not necessarily meant to be the best, but they're meant to feel the biggest. They're meant to like be this huge, beefy guy on the battlefield that maybe you have a few of. You're probably not going to do your whole army against him, but for the players who just want like that fantasy of, I want some huge guys, I'm going to roll in and destroy everything, I would like them to feel good to use. So these health bars are ticking down a lot nicer. We saw that flash yellow because we killed some units. We got enough resources to spawn another one. They're rolling in a lot faster. I feel like they should almost have like splash damage. But we can always add that in later. That felt a lot better. I was worried 100 health would be too much. But it seems fine. And I think the cool thing when we get multiplayer will be this kind of transactional exchange of resources. What you're seeing right now, since the enemy's only spawning sharpshooters, which they can do because they can ignore resources because it's the test AI, when we destroy those sharpshooters, we're only getting gas back. So very quickly we're running out of minerals. So we can't spawn more golems, which take both gas and minerals. But in a real game, what would happen is, if they are only spawning sharpshooters, they would run out of gas. All that gas would be like in assets on the battlefield that we can collect, but then they would be forced to spawn probably stone guards if they're out of gas, or wizards if they have a little bit of gas. So there's that natural push to make them spawn different units as well. So there's always this exchange of resources back and forth on the battlefield that kind of adjusts. If they're spawning a lot of these guys, after you've spawned whatever you need to destroy them, which is probably these guys, you'll get a lot of gas back so you can spawn whichever of the two you want of these. If you spawn a lot of these, all the minerals will be on the battlefield, so you'll probably spawn sharpshooters if you're out of minerals, and the enemy will take out all of these, they'll get both gas and minerals. They'll have a choice between whatever, and so on. So there's some light strategy elements that I want to make sure are included, just because Andrew and I are really big strategy gamers, but we're shooting for it to feel like a typing game. So if you don't want to deal with the strategy, it's really easy to just type all the words, and anytime you see one of these guys turn red down below, like you don't have enough resources to spawn something, you just pick a different one, and it doesn't really matter. Like, that's red out of the corner of my eye while typing. I can see not spawning guys, so I'll switch to another one, keep typing. If that turns red, I'll switch to something else. And if that one's red as well, I'll just keep it rolling until I eventually look up and be like, oh, why am I red? Oh, I am full of food. That's the max number of units I can have. So there's a lot more we can do, like adding buildings that you could build or other things that you can do that'll give you more, maybe more food or more abilities that you can cast, like you spawn units faster for a few seconds or something like that. But in general, I'd say the typing game aspect is pretty good so far. Yeah. If anybody in the chat has comments or things they like or dislike, I would love to hear it. We are gonna put this on itch probably tonight or tomorrow and just get some feedback from other friends who really like typing games. This is based off a really old custom map on StarCraft called Nexus Word Wars, which somebody on Discord reminded me of last week, which is why we started building it. Looked really fun, and it has been fun to build. I'll probably just poke around the code a little bit more. We're about half an hour over our normal schedule, but it's fun to work on, so I don't mind. Maybe last thing I'll do, I feel like this words per minute is always really low, so I want to double check the math on that, but it's obviously not very polished, but it is playable, so you can play it in your browser. I have a link in the stream, bottom right below my face. If you go to chromagolem.itch.io, you can play Word Wars. It's our most recent demo. We've also done several other demos that are a lot more AI focused. We have one where it's more of a retro brawler, like Super Nintendo or even Nintendo style of you fighting on the street, and eventually the cops will show up, and switches over to this more conversational interface of you're talking back and forth to the cop, and it's all AI generated, the conversation, so your goal is to convince them that you're innocent, but they're responding to a call of violence, and it's like, hey, you fit the criteria, why are you here, give me an alibi, etc. People really like lying to the cops in that game. That's fun. Making up crazy stories. That's called Smack to the Future. It's also on the same page as our other demos. And after that, we got a lot of good response, so I thought up an idea for something that basically takes it a lot broader. And Andrew and I built You Are Not Alice, which is a social engineering sandbox where you play as a hacker who has infiltrated a computer on a company network, and you basically take over their computer, and you have access to like all their files, all their coworkers' chats. Their whole file system is generated with AI, so it's slightly different every time you play. There's all kinds of files you can browse through and explore and read. There's chats with all their coworkers that you can scroll back through, and that's all generated with AI, but you can also talk to their coworkers as them, which is also done with AI. And the goal is basically to send that initial virus file that's on your computer to each of those coworkers and convince them to run it. And when they run it, then you get a little notification as the hacker saying like, hey, new computer compromised, and there's a little switch that you can work with that lets you switch over to their computer, and then you have a whole new file system to play with. You have all their contacts to talk to, and you kind of progress through this whole company by lying to coworkers and convincing them to run files and tricking people, and it's fun. It's very sandboxy right now. There's not a lot of like defined goals, but that's what we've been building on stream for the last couple months. And we're hoping to get it a little more polished up, add a few more features, and then probably put it as a game on Steam or Epic or something like that. It's on itch right now, so you can try it out, but it's still very, very early. And yeah, that's kind of what we're doing at Chroma Golem right now. We're really excited about how AI can be used to create new mechanics in games, and a lot of the underlying engines and systems can be augmented with AI a little bit. We have another demo where you're on an island, you're running a restaurant, and the crafting recipes are all generated based on what you're trying to build. So if you want to make shepherd's pie and there's no potatoes in the game, we create potato seeds. We create the whole like farming progression of potatoes, so you can grow potatoes and then refine them into other stuff and make that into shepherd's pie and so on. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that we can do with AI, and the last several months we've been just building these small demos on stream, trying to get some feedback of like what's fun, what's not. Obviously there's a lot of stuff you could do with AI that's not fun, but there's also a lot of stuff you could do with AI that's really, really cool and like hasn't been possible in games before. So we're trying to pinpoint where that stuff is. And this has been a fun project that doesn't really include any AI. We might add some more later, but I like typing games, I like strategy games, so it was a fun project for a couple weeks on stream. And lastly, if you are interested in game development or AI in game development and so on, we do have a Discord that we run for game developers, AI enthusiasts. There's a link to it in the description below the stream. We'd love for you to join, and yeah, we'll be posting demos there. In the new year, we'll be doing a lot more streaming. This is the last stream for the year. I'm going to take a week off for Christmas, or I'm going to take the Christmas day that would be streaming off, at least. And we'll be back in the new year. Both Andrew and I will be streaming. We'll probably also stream some games that we're playing. Yeah, would love to have you along for the ride. Join the Discord, follow the Twitch, do all the stuff. Follow us on itch, or just play the games if you want. And I'm gonna find us another game developer that I will drop you all off on, and I'm gonna maybe do some more research on how to do good post-processing, because it's probably not fun for you to watch me watch YouTube videos or read articles on stream, but I want to make things look a little bit nicer before I publish this game tonight. So let's see who we've got here. Let's pick somebody with not very many viewers, because I'm not dropping off too many viewers either. Watching stuff than programming. You know, maybe people do watch stuff on Twitch. Let's see. Working on Scuffle. Hello World. Let's see what we got here. Ads. What can you do? Oh, I realized I'm not logged in on Twitch on this window, so it's fine. Well, not sure. Oh, he's watching another video. Okay, that's fine. Let's find an English channel at least. And this guy looks promising. Some Godot. In an editor at least. Writing some code. Looks like beautiful code. And doesn't accept raids. You know, there's only a couple of us in chat, so we don't necessarily need to raid someone this week. We can just say goodbye. Thanks for joining me, making this fun game, and I won't be back next Tuesday because I'll be doing Christmassy things, but the Tuesday after that, which is like the 2nd or so, come January, every Tuesday, I'll be streaming here, so come on back, and thanks. See ya.